The war on ignorance seems to be a war that we don't want to fight. It seems like we have positioned ourselves to find one, data that proves a point, but not really look at data that omits the point. A lot of times when we're looking at education, we rely on these thoughts of old to be foundational principles to establish what excellence is, what things to be true and things to be right. But no one tends to question if we're living in times right now that is a response to the onset of racism, various injustices, various biases. Could it very well be that the foundational things that we've learned could also have some form of separation, divisive type thinking, some type of injustice embedded even in the way that information is disseminated? I find it hard because, like you said, I spend a lot of time doing consulting work, and this is not a dig at a lot of my SHRM certified peers. But if the standard is how do we come to a place where we can become more inclusive, but everyone is running in the same problem, why didn't anybody think like, hey, it could be the things that we're taught. We're taught divisiveness. And the problem is, the reason why it's unconscious or implicit is because it's supposed to be unrecognizable. So a lot of things we are taught that are not necessarily true. Like the biggest misconception of them all is proper English. There is no such thing as proper English in America when there are over 27 dialects that are spoken that are attached to cultures. If you look it up, America doesn't have an official language. America doesn't have an official religion, but yet we subscribe to the ideology of believing that there is one. And then there comes the code switching. Where do we think we learn code switching from? It starts in the education sector. It starts when we come into school. As young as 5 years old, we learn that the color of our skin is different. We learn that the vernacular that we must use is different if we want to survive. But survival is a competition for many people of various colors. For our brown, black, and yellow sisters and brothers, this survival is a competition just to stay alive. So we got to constantly learn over and over and over again what is acceptable. But the rules that we're using are not really in our favor, and we never really understand who formed these rules and how can we say that they are true, but we're learning them in school, but we're never learning the counter. We're never learning, well, what is my acceptable behavior outside of this infrastructure? Where is the appreciation? We learn about diversity, but we realize that we're not diversified even in the diversity spectrum because it leans. So when we talk about education, we wonder why there's so many behavioral things. Like, why is it that our young Black boys are suspended 6 times more than their counterpart? Why is it? Why is it that our young girls are considered more aggressive and attitudinal? What is the barometer that we're measuring these things from? It starts with the foundation of what we believe is excellence, and that really starts at education. Many people want to talk about changing the law. Many people want to blame upbringing, but a lot of people don't want to talk about the systemic, systematic, amorphic, and individual types of discrimination that are infused within our educational structure. What do we think a lot of those great educators were doing? A lot of the things that we subscribe to today, what do we truly believe? So when we want to talk about disparities in education, I really want us to challenge the foundation on what we establish as excellence in education. Why is education a competition? Education originally started to boost the economy, to give people skills necessary for the economy to thrive. When did it become a way of life and a way of life only? What happened to unity within education? What happened to the exclusiveness within education? It seemed like to me there needs to be a call to return back to the core foundation of what we established education to be. And we need to remove some of these things that we are classifying as excellence if it's doing the counter. If we really want to change the conversation and have a different way that we approach this, maybe we should go back to the foundation instead of trying to complicate it by tacking other things on. Why can't we put things back in place that really do help propel us as a community? Now, a lot of people, I get that. A lot of people are so race conscious, which is nothing wrong with being race conscious. But if we're going to be race conscious, we still got to think in an inclusive mindset. We still got to think about an inclusive we and not an exclusive we, and think that, okay, we have a problem. And that we who have a problem includes every last demographic and the things that we're taught and the things that we allow to be introduced at the youngest of young ages. And so the true disparity in education is that we're not taking that fine-tooth comb and looking at the foundational principles that are being introduced at the earliest of young ages. Because we never stop being a child, we only learn how to be an adult. And so those core foundational principles that we learn at an early age, they only are compounded, and guess what? They become habits, they become behaviors, they become cultures, and they become society. And before you know it, we're living in a divisive society and a divisive culture that is different from just what parents are doing, that is different just from what religious institutions are doing. We have to start looking at the true disparity of education and making sure that we are not reinforcing a skill that is counterproductive by saying, hey, we need to combat this, but still doing the very thing that we're trying to combat against. So I think the true disparity is not taking a fine-tooth comb at the foundational principles that are being introduced in education. I'll stop there. I'll stop there.
You sure you want to stop there?
I will stop there because I felt my heart beating fast.
Your heart beating fast? We don't want your heart to beat too fast. So thank you.
You know, doing this, for those who don't know, 19 years in higher ed, for one university that I started out with, I was a dean, and I was one of three young Black deans in the entire school. So you learned a lot about what was appropriate, what was accepted, and a lot of misnomers of how we look at education. So that's where that passion comes from. So I'll stop there.
Well, I thank you for your passion and your words, and I'm sure that once we have all the speakers, there's going to be some time for some dialogue and some questions from the group. So I'm excited to have the next speaker jump online. It's a gentleman that I had an opportunity to meet. I think earlier this year we had a chance to meet Jeff and talk for the first time. I've met a ton of people over the years, but I don't think I've ever met anyone with the moral fortitude of this gentleman. And I won't even go into the details, but I love him like a brother. Mr. Jeff Hybeck, who's a chartered financial analyst, senior portfolio manager of SEM Wealth Management. And for some of you who are not familiar what that is, easiest way to put it is Jeff runs money, basically Wall Street style. So I'm excited to have him on the line. And you want to talk about statistician that will take a deep dive into the numbers and everything that's going on. So I'm excited to have Jeff on the line. So Jeff, feel free to talk about the disparities as you see it in the wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ed. And gosh, Jay is always a tough act to follow. So I apologize. I won't have his same enthusiasm vocally, but don't take that as me not being passionate about this, because I am passionate about numbers, and to me, I come from such a different background than obviously a lot of the people here on this call. And I think we all come from different experiences and different levels. And to me, our firm is we call ourselves financial engineers. So engineers always base things on data. And I've been very adamant to just take a step back and look at the data and see what it says. And I think this year has been a wake-up call to a lot of people, especially in the finance industry. It's not a very diverse industry at all. And I don't get to interact with a lot of people who don't look like me. And so as we educated ourselves here at our company, the numbers just blew me away. And to look at it at first, 22% of Blacks and 29% of Hispanics live in poverty, compared to only 12% of whites. And there's a lot of things, and Ed and I have had conversations, and we've had Jay have conversations, and I agree with him. There's a lot of disparities in education. And one thing, I grew up in a very small town in rural Colorado, basically call it Kansas. I was in the far eastern side of the state there, and we had educational gaps there versus people in Denver or people in the bigger cities. And we always, when we started having kids, wanted to find a good education system. And we then moved our family to Arizona, obviously not the best in education. But then when we relocated to the Richmond, Virginia area, it kind of blew me away, because Virginia is one of the best in education. I think they're top 3 or 4 in the whole country in education. But one of the numbers I saw was 80% of white third graders read at grade level, compared to only 58% of Blacks. And so exactly what Jay was saying, here we are in one of the best states in education in the country, and there's already a big gap. And one of the things you find as you start then looking at income is a lower education leads to lower income. And so we've had this conversation of, well, is the lack of income the reason people aren't getting a good education, or is a good education leading to a lack of income? And I don't really think there's a perfect answer to that, because I think they're both so interconnected that we have to address both of those issues. But just looking at some of the statistics, is going backwards. You look at people with a college degree, whites with a college degree make an average $71,000 a year. However, Blacks who have the college degree only make $59,000 a year. And to put that in perspective, the average household income for our entire country is $53,000. So whites who go to college end up with an income way above average, and that's just one person. So the average household income is $53,000, but just one white person going to college makes an average of $71,000. But a Black person who gets a college degree only makes $59,000. So you have that disparity. But then it starts getting even worse. High school only. So if you just get a high school diploma or a GED, the white person on average gets a $37,000 a year income. A Black person only $29,000 a year. So there you do see an income gap, because the average white person with a college degree gets $71,000. Yet a white person, $37,000 with just high school. So education is important regardless of race. But you start asking yourself, well, why is there such a big gap in income? And obviously we can't solve that on just this one call. And it's something that, Ed and I have talked about, and some of our colleagues here at SCM have talked about of, we're not going to just make everything equal in one year or with one election, but we need to start this conversation and ask why. And, one of the things that will skew the numbers, of course, is, well, if you get a college degree, what field do you go into? And, we looked at things that the highest paying industries in our country are healthcare, financial services, and then what they call professional and business services. In the healthcare industry, 75% of the people working there are white. So one of the things we've talked about is, we got to figure out ways to get more minorities into the healthcare field, because there's some opportunities there. And, we had the conversation with the doctor who unfortunately can't join us today, but we've got to, as a country, try to get more minorities into that. But, the second highest paid field is my field, which is financial services. And so we've looked at this, okay, we need to educate people, but we also need to take action. What can we do to make a change for our country, and starting with our own communities? And so in the financial services industry, 80% of the people are white. But what blew me away is 98% of all the assets in our country are managed by white men. 98%. And, in our industry, the way you make money is you get a percentage of the assets you manage. So we might have 80% of the industry as white, but almost all of the money out there is being managed by white men. And some of the conversations we've had, about, well, how do we change that? And, in our industry, only 14% of the industry is Black, but most of those are in really small roles. They're not in the higher level roles. Only 2% of the upper management of financial services firms are Black. And that's obviously where the big money is. But the pool, and I've heard people argue this of say, well, we just don't have a pool of enough people. And this is where it goes back to the disparities in education of, well, we got to get people in there. And I look at my own experience in education and my upbringing. So I grew up in a farming town. My grandpa owned a small business that actually serviced farm machinery. Our whole family worked in that business. So me as a 10-year-old was working in that field. My mom ran the office and the parts, basically the retail side of things. I would always sneak out of the shop and into the office with my mom, because I like the numbers and I like that. And so I was really good at numbers, but my very small high school, town of 12,000, had one business class, and it was accounting. And I thought, well, this is my only chance to work with numbers, so I'm going to go into accounting. And long story short, I ended up thinking accounting just bores me to tears, and I'm going to do that. But the point of the story is I've had conversations with people, and Ed's in our industry. A colleague of ours, or an employee of ours, Garland Scott, who I don't think he's on the call, but he's talked about it. He's like, I literally, as a Black person, stumbled into this industry. I wasn't told about it in middle school or high school. I just happened to see, hey, there's a job opening, and I interviewed and I actually got it. A lot of people don't know the potential that you can have in our industry. And so part of our initiatives at SEM is we need to get into, first we said high schools and colleges, but Ed even said, let's get back into middle schools. Because one of the cool things about financial services is you literally need a laptop and yourself. And that's it. You can make as much money as possible in our industry, but you have to know that there's potential there. You have to get the education. And so we need to start getting into these minority-based communities in these schools to show them there is more than just going to work every day for somebody else. There's more to this. And then you come back to it, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ed because I'm going to go way off on a tangent. But, we see a lot of bad decisions made with money regardless of race. But the surveys show that people like to work with advisors who look like them. So if you're a Black executive and you have done well for yourself, you don't have a lot of Black financial advisors out there who maybe understand you and work with you. So you might go off and make decisions on your own and not get the advice you need. So my passion project and what we want to do as a firm is start educating kids about, hey, look, there are a lot of opportunities for you If you're good at numbers, if you're good with people, if you're good with computers, there's opportunities out there. We just got to tell them that they're there and start addressing ways that we can start closing these gaps in income and teach minorities that there's a way to get into these fields and make money. And again, it circles back to what Jay started with, is we got to fix our education system. But I'm not an educator, but I can work with educators and help them. And that's the thing, as business professionals, I encourage everybody to do is talk to the schools in your community in those minority-based, minority-heavy schools, and say, how can we help you educate your kids?
Thank you, Jeff. That's some good stuff, and we can go on and on talking about that particular subject. But we're going to leave the questions. So everyone, if you got questions, please use the chat. If you're on Zoom, use the chat. If you're on Facebook, please use some questions in there. We'll answer the questions after our last speaker. I don't even know where to start with this next speaker. I'm glad that he could finally join us. A busy man. Reading, I had a chance to meet him. I think we first met beginning of this year, and amazing individual. His bio is so long, I don't know if I can read it all, but he's a Texas State Trooper, criminal investigator, special ops. He's a TEDx speaker. He's a motivational speaker. He's a coach. He's a 3-time junior Olympic national champ. I can go on and on. Mr. Jermaine Gaspar, glad to have you on the line, sir. Feel free to just chime in and, from the law enforcement perspective, and just and talk to us a little bit.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. Sorry about my tardiness. I was actually working, so I had to try to button some things up. I won't talk long. I'll do a better job, I think, answering questions, especially in the climate of today. I would like to start with, I think the role of criminal justice and the impact of criminal justice definitely is interrelated and connected to, 1, education, and 2, finances. We see that definitely, right? As Jeff was just saying about the 3rd grade reading levels, right? So prisons in America are built based on 3rd grade reading scores. So based on the inability to read and literacy rates, here in America, we identify how many prison cells that we're going to have 15, 20 years from now. That's how imperative it is to understand the power of education as it relates to finance as well. And when we dive even deeper into that, when we look at the prison population, they are 50% more likely to have sensory issues, whether they be sight, hearing, speaking, things of that nature, right? And what we're seeing there is how that's related to education is because these people are differential learners, they learn differently, and it doesn't fit into the educational mold, but they still have to provide a means of taking care of themselves. They find ways to take care of themselves outside of the system, which creates criminality. So when I say that it all ties together, we see how one thing goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and it ends up to where we see. Also, when we speak of education, we look at the special ed or SPEC community is what they call it now. Those numbers are almost equivalent to the percentages of incarceration based on culture, based on race and gender. So all these things deal with criminality. We have to, 1, start at the beginning phases of it and identify how our children are learning and give them purpose at a young age. When we start, I've been working and creating programs for violence interruption. And violence interruption is really identifying violence in different communities, especially urban communities, and how to interrupt those violences. My background being in martial arts, sports, military style training, things of that nature, gives me a different scope of violence. And most people identify violence as physical contact, right? And that's definitely one portion of violence. But I incorporate and define violence as anything that intercedes your will. Anything that intercedes your will or your intent. That is why when you're traveling down the road, a regular Tahoe or Caprice or Chevy vehicle with no lights on it can't stop you because it has no authority tied to it. But that same vehicle with lights on it, with police markers on the side of it, turns the lights on, you pull over, right? And you feel violated once you're pulled over because that authority, there's been no physical touch there, but you feel violated because your will was interrupted. That is why someone can kick down your door at your home and you feel as though you've been violated. No one has physically touched you, but your will, your intent has been skewed by some other authority. When we understand violence in that context, it changes the scope of why people feel violated and why there is a concern that addresses with criminality. Again, like Jeff, I can go down a tangent or a rabbit hole. So I would really like to just really smother the scope of what it is that the panel and the people that are watching really want to talk about with the disparities in law enforcement, because there's so many different disparities. It's hard just to sync on just one thing.
Okay, so thank you for those quick comments, and I'm going to ask everyone now if you can come off camera. I know there's some amazing people out there. I look at Lakeisha coming out of Massachusetts, Dr. Holly. This is a great time for us to just start having some dialogue. I think it's important for us to start having conversations that sometimes are uncomfortable, conversations, to ask questions that we've always wanted to know, but just never had the opportunity to ask. This is a safe space for us to talk, for us to learn, and just get some questions answered. So if you want to ask a question in the chat, or if you want to ask a question, just come off the camera and come on the camera and the mic, feel free to. I'm looking at a message from a gentleman. He says, I believe that the education being provided to our young students in schools is still not being reinforced in the home. The racial biases and financial misunderstandings voiced in the home are drummed into the kids' heads and then brought back into the school and shared with their friends. It's a vicious cycle that I don't believe the educational system is handling well. Completely agree with you. I mean,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
I know I wanted to add a little bit to that because I'm sorry, I deal with a lot going into unconscious bias because it's the standard of education that a lot of people don't realize. The education system as it is doesn't take into account cultural diversity. So because it doesn't take in cultural diversity, we're saying the parents aren't reinforcing. What is happening is the educational system is not being sensitive to the cultures in which it's trying to educate. This is not cultural diversity. This is really like cultural divergence. So we got to make sure that we're not going into places and trying to take out a culture and say, this is the standard. Remember, America doesn't have a standard, and we need to make sure that when we're providing something, no matter how low the level it is, it's akin to that area. That's like going down into Charleston, South Carolina, and saying you guys are not speaking proper English because you're not taking into account Gullah Geechee. That's like telling them that what they're doing, they need to get an honest trade because basket weaving is not an honest trade. No, we have to be sensitive to what is being reinforced. And that's the biggest disparity, is because people are not doing that part. Meaning, are we really going into a system and saying, okay, are we really going to make this community better? Or are we coming and saying, this is the standard and we need to bring everybody up to this level? That's the biggest problem that's happening right there. Parents can't reinforce what is a cultural norm for them. And you're telling them to stop being them just for the sake of a child. And they don't want their child to lose their identity of who they truly are.
I like that. Also, I'm sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and I'll ask after you're done.
I deal with a lot of children. We have a track organization that we've been very successful with. Last 10 years, all our children have gone to college and graduated, in addition to some other programming. And what motivates those programming is we understand that Our children are measured for the 8 hours that they attend school, right? That 8 hours is what they're measuring. But the 16 hours outside of school determines who you get in the morning. And from being in that situation of coming to school hungry, coming to school with lack or without, I'm sensitive to that, because I do understand that the 16 hours away from school determines who you get in the morning. In addition to that, having a son that's dyslexic and later finding that I was dyslexic in my 40s, I do also see how oftentimes when you can put a child into a space where you will learn this way and this way only, and then put the onus on the child to learn the way that you're teaching them, rather than professionalizing education, or like we are attempting to professionalize policing to find different ways to tap into the youth that we're trying to grow. So there's a couple of different things that are going on simultaneously. And then the third part is that there are some times when we're dealing with youth that do not have support at home, that will not get the reinforcement at home. We can't utilize that as the scapegoat for saying that this is the child that just won't make it over the hump, right? So as we do this and as we create this scope, it has to be one from caring, and identify caring as providing a need before it's needed, that we care for children. And though we will never have 100% success rate, we cannot say that it's okay because of this. I don't buy into that. I'm sorry, man, go ahead.
No, those are great points. I appreciate that. I'm from a family of educators, and I've taught adult education my entire life, corporate training, but my mother and my daughter both taught elementary schools. My daughter is a 4th grade teacher, inner city Raleigh. And it is my opinion, may be wrong, that if our children had teachers that looked more like them and had similar cultures to them, we would have a better time in the school system. And I would love to hear what the panelists think about that.
Go ahead, Jay. You take that one first.
I didn't want to go first. I didn't want to, but no. That's one of the things that my wife and I both talk about. As much as I hate to say it, as much as we say we're the United States of America, we are so divided in so many different levels, because what I was qualified for in South Carolina, I'm not qualified for in North Carolina. I was literally told I'm gonna have to go get another bachelor's degree. And I'm like, yeah, Jay's not doing that. Just to be certified for what was kind of like an entry level in South Carolina here. And then in Georgia, that's a whole different thing, because that's where I'm born and raised. And you would think that if we're trying to produce a next generation of whatever, excellence, right? There would be some type of commonality across the states. So one of the bigger things is, if we talk about the RDU, it's a place of transplants. So if I'm handling that and I'm coming from 2 states over, I can only imagine people who are coming from all over the globe just to reside here. And I do think that we have to look at comparable experience, and also look at ways that we standardize excellence. I know I hate to say it that way, but what we consider excellence may be to the disadvantage and may be part of the problem that is perpetuating the very thing we're trying to get rid of. And that kind of goes back to that same statement. So I think that what we have to do is, those who are skilled in their professions outside of education, I think we need more of them, like our psychologists, to reinforce the need for the sense of belonging, the need of having representation. Those who are like Jeff and saying, hey, if they don't belong and if they don't feel like they're gravitating, it hinders learning, which hinders their money. So it's just things like that. I think that we have to come together in all cross professions and really say, okay, education needs to be more representative of the real world. Okay.
And I'll just add from the financial standpoint, I obviously can't speak to, Holly's specific question on, having people who look like us teaching us. But if you just look at the school districts and how teachers are compensated, it's all based on tax revenue, which is off of property tax and funding from the states. And, in both when I lived in Tucson, Arizona, And now in the Richmond area, you see the poorest districts, they barely pay their teachers anything. So the best teachers end up moving out because they're being compensated more outside of the inner cities. And so unless we totally change the way we compensate teachers, it is still capitalistic. I don't blame teachers for going where they make more money. We need to change the way they're paid and do something from a national government perspective to get money into those schools and reward the good teachers who actually work in the lower income areas, because it's frustrating. And like I said, I've seen it in both cities that I've lived in, where the inner city schools are ridiculous, but then you look at how much they pay a teacher and you're talking $20,000 to $30,000 a year difference.
Wow. Flo,
Definitely.
you had a comment, Flo, real quick?
I was just going to simply say that with me being an educator, working with fourth graders and fifth graders that are SPED, they call them EC kids now, and even with the general ed kids, they see no one that looks like them. And there was a presentation done by the leadership team at the school that I work for. And in the disparities, the white kids were excelling and the kids of color were the ones that needed the help. And then within the school system as a whole, you're teaching kids of color and the children does not look like you whatsoever. The bulk of them are kids of color. That's in education. Jay was talking about healthcare. Okay, I have a diverse background, work history. So that's another area of disparities. When you talk about seeking out help and doing all of this to help the minorities, again, when you see people that don't look like you and don't know truly your culture and what you are dealing with on a daily basis, in the Black culture, you were shunned upon if you went to a psychiatrist. That's why the disparities are high dealing with mental health, because that was something that you did not go get assistance for. You got a check for, yeah, a crazy check, but at the end of the day, they didn't receive the help that they wanted. That's what they called it. They'd rather receive money than seeking out help. So it's a lack of knowledge that happens in people of color community compared to the privileges that white children have, or children that comes from elite family. That lifestyle, they are afforded way more than children of color. And law enforcement, that's another thing that I hold near and dear to my heart, without a doubt. And you want to talk about, Jeff, as far as the pay grade and all of that, we get paid pennies. Anybody that works in public service, they get paid pennies on top of pennies. And those are the ones that should get paid the most. I'm not discounting anything else, any type of career, but when you're putting your life on the line and you're making like maybe $20,000 being a police officer, 28,000, 30,000, etc., that's no money when you think about your life. And then with everything that's going on in society right now, want to talk about disparities, about law enforcement, with the Blacks being killed, not just in the criminal justice system as a whole, they end up in three places: institution, jail, or the grave. That's my take.
Yeah, and just to tap onto that, Flo, it's the same way, they're paid, the public service people are paid by tax revenue. And so by default, the lower income districts are going to get way less money to pay people. And it's just so backwards.
It is, but that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. But that just shows you how our land of the free, home of the brave need to take a step back and reevaluate its complete system, not just dealing with racism, but the system as a whole when it comes to individuals, people of color specifically.
So Jermaine, I have a question that I know is directed towards you, and it says, do you think the police departments need a reform with training? It seems as if they have failed and no corrections have been put in place. Many police officers are ex-military with mindsets of kill first, protect second, or aim big, miss small with shooting their weapons.
So what's the direct question? Do we think there needs to be retraining?
Yes.
Okay. So there's definitely been a lot of training and retraining within law enforcement, especially within the state of Texas. I take that question one step further. One of the reasons I became a police officer was because my grandfather challenged me when he said that if we do not police our own communities, how can we complain about others that police our communities? So the word responsible is two words: respond and ability. To be responsible is to respond with your abilities and your skill sets. Oftentimes, as an officer of 20 years, I work in inner city. I have inner city organizations, things of that nature. I see a mom with her children, and they say something to the extent of, "Don't talk to him. I'm gonna put him in jail. I'm gonna tell him to put you in jail, or run away from him because he's the police." Things of that nature, right? And what that does is that creates this negative catalyst between the people that are supposed to serve the community and the children. One of the things that I think will change the scope of what law enforcement is we beginning to raise our own protectors of our own communities. You know, the young boy, the young girl that's gifted with their hands, that has a protector at heart and protector at spirit. Once we start sending our own people from our own communities to law enforcement academies, which requires a responsibility because there's a certain kind of lifestyle you have to live in order to fill in that application, to go through that polygraphs. I mean, there's a lifestyle that you have to commit to do that. And once we start committing to that, more of our own commit to that, we can truly police from the inside out and not the outside in. I don't believe the issue is the training. I believe the issue is the people, right? So I'm very successful with community policing because I'm back home policing where I grew up. So I have relationships. I have a love. I have an affluency. I have an affinity for the people that I come in contact with because these are the people that are growing up in the same streets that I grew up in. So that's totally different from someone outside of your community coming in and policing inside the community. Anytime you come in contact with something that you don't know or understand, you become apprehensive. Apprehensive in making decisions creates stress. If you make a decision under duress and you feel like you're unqualified, you're either going to underperform or overperform. Underperform means you get hurt. Overperform means you hurt people that you don't intend on hurting, right? Those issues become the issue. It's not the training, it's the people, it's the sensitivity, because at the end of the day, people are making decisions that we have to live with and have dire consequences.
It's like T. Griffin, you have a question? You're on mute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm a Navy military veteran. And I also, my job title, I'm an education compliance survey specialist for the VA. I audit programs for the VA education programs. And one of the things I have noticed, one of my, we basically audit schools, training facilities, police departments, fire departments, all those type of fields. What I've noticed in the police training, they have made changes over the years. And so the changes in the training has been made. The one thing I don't see with corporations and military and police departments is what I used to see when I was a kid. When I was a kid growing up, I used to see the police officers in the neighborhood. We knew the police officers. The police officers knew who the kids were in the neighborhood. They knew who the good kids were or the quote unquote bad kids were. They came in mentorship programs. They read to the students. Some of the communities, as a military person of 12 years, I got out the Navy and I started working for the VA, and I traveled around different areas of the United States with my family. So some of the school districts that were better school districts and better communities, I noticed that the corporations and the military and the police departments, the fire departments, they came into the schools, in elementary schools and middle schools. They read to us. They participated in our fundraisers. They were always there supporting the schools. Those environments worked better. However, when I was in those environments were majority in communities that were not popular minority areas. Being a military member as an African-American female, there's not many of us in those fields as it is in other career paths. So I see things differently when I come into a community. I see in the white communities, we get more support because there's more community support, more corporations are supporting the schools, and more things are, computers are being bought, iPads are being bought for the schools from corporations. They come in and they're building that relationship early. As one of the speakers said earlier, is get into those schools. I remember when I was younger, Texas Instruments, when I was in Texas, they would come into our schools. And that's how I learned about algebra and calculus and things of that sort. That's what gave me the motivation to try to do more and learn more and get my college degree. I don't see those resources in the minorities based schools. And I think that's what's going on with the disparities between schools that have predominantly African-American and people of color compared to the other communities that have more Caucasian in their backgrounds. I think that we have more community involvement. I think that would actually help close the gap and help bring those educators in, those mentors in, and bring that education piece back that we used to have back in the day. And that's my opinion.
I personally wholeheartedly agree. And that was one of the questions that I, wrote down that I was going to ask you, Jermaine, about community policing. And it's something that we really don't see. And she talked about, I remember growing up in Massachusetts, the cops would be walking. They're not just sitting in their car somewhere, they were just walking, and you got the chance to know them. They'll laugh with you. And every now and then you'll see something on social media with a cop in the neighborhood, maybe picking up a basketball and getting to know the community. Do you see that coming back anytime, or are you seeing it in Texas anywhere?
Definitely. First, Ms. Griffin, did you go to Lincoln High School?
Yes, Griffin is my married name.
Okay,
Well,
I thought you looked familiar. Okay, we grew up in the same. We went to the same high school. Look, when I saw, I said, "Yeah, I know what she's talking about." All right.
Yeah, I'm in Indiana now. That's my ex-married name.
Outstanding. All right, so community policing. Policing and beat policing has changed because the demographics of criminality has changed, right? There are the pros to policing and beat policing of walking. The limitations are if there's a call 10 blocks down the street, how does the officer get to that call if he's on foot? And with the limited amount of resources, especially like in the city of Dallas, where they're short officers, it's hard to put officers outside of their cars and walking and not inside vehicles so they can respond from call to call to call, right? That's one avenue. What I will say is I've been very successful community policing because of the programmings that I've created and the programs that I'm a part of. I know Chief Hall, who is retiring at the end of the year, has spoke of implementing different programs that would incentivize officers being part of nonprofit organizations inside of the areas in which they work. And community policing is the only way for us to be part of the community. I think that also goes back to the people that you're hiring. Are you hiring community-oriented officers? There are different officers for different tasks, just like there are different people for different tasks. You have some officers that are 100% number driven. You have logic driven, you have emotional driven, just like they have different people. So when we start looking at the science of policing, we have to look at the science of what kind of people are we putting in specific spaces and areas.
Jermaine, I'll just ask you, because 30 years ago, if you worked for a government, whether it was for the water department or police department, most of them required that you lived in your jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's just not enough people wanting to be police to start requiring something like that now? Or maybe cities should offer incentives or bonuses if you actually live there? I mean, a lot of places now, you don't even have to live, if you're on city council, you don't have to live in the district you're represented. What are your thoughts on that?
There have been different police agencies that have incentivized officers living in areas, and I think that is a great opportunity. At the same time, you can't take away the officers' right to live where they want to live, right? Because they're in America, and if they want to live in a certain school district or a certain space for their family, they should have the right to do so. I think by making an officer live in a certain space, then you take away from the talent pool that you can draw from, right? I think the best thing to do is to create so many incentives that it makes them want to live in the space. Because having an officer that lives here but doesn't want to live here is not a positive, will not have a positive impact because it's negatively driven.
John Lyon, instead of dropping your comment in the chat, won't you come on the mic and just ask that question?
Yeah. So whereas I agree with a lot that has been said, I wonder, and I want to ask this to the panel: are we dismissing the responsibility of African American or minority parents or homes? I understand that, yes, there are some changes that need to be made in the way that we may learn, but I also believe that there's a responsibility that that parents have. And so as I've gone to communities where, we've tried to reach out to those that are in poverty and in need. And what you see and sometimes in these communities that you find that, especially in African American, that their kids are not, so their activity that the parents are into, different things from drugs to other things, and the kids are just on their own. We've gone to communities where we've delivered backpacks. Parents don't even show up. We've done other things, other drives. And so, whereas I do think that there needs to be a change, I'm not sure that there's not enough emphasis on what parents are doing in the home today and having the expectation of our kids. And I think that's causing a huge disparity as well. And so I wanted to know what the panel thought about that.
Definitely. Can I jump on that?
Yeah, let me just read this one quick comment that Ms. Griffin dropped before you answered. She said I think no one is dismissing the parents. However, if Black parents have the same tools and resources as parents in other communities, then we could speak on responsibilities. And that's a whole nother conversation we can dive into, but go ahead, Jermaine.
So it's about the programming, okay? So the violence interrupted programming that I'm creating and I'm drafting now, it's four-pronged. It's mentorship, youth leadership development, parent inclusion, and the creation of a social media push to drive successful stories, right? You cannot take a child, again, and take them for 8 hours and give them a healthy dose of whatever, and then throw him back into a cesspool and then expect for him to come back clean the next day. So as we develop the child, it has to be some components of parental and parent development. Part of what we've created and what we're in the city of Dallas is now for nonviolent felons, there's a programming that they can go through where one, they can get their record expunged, and two, receive employment, right? That's part of the process. I think that the biggest thing is MPR, means, power, and respect. All right. Can I provide the means that I need to satisfy the requirement to take care of my family? Do I feel I am empowered? And am I doing things that establish me giving respect? I think what John is saying is 100% valid, which that in the sense that there has to be a space where the parents are given the opportunity. But when we start talking about criminality, when we start talking about parents that are not in the household because they're incarcerated, things of that nature, those things come into play, whereas they might not be there for several reasons. And again, there is no catch-all for, like John, there's no catch-all to catch all of it, but we do have to create programs and systems that uplift the child as well as uplift the opportunity for means to be created financially within the household.
Okay.
I want to add.
I'd like to say something. First of all, no, we're not dismissing the responsibility of the Black parent at all. And I completely understand what you were saying, John, but you have to look at the time that you were growing up, the time that Jermaine, Ed were growing up. It was a different generation. It was a different culture then. It was a community more so than it is now. So you had your neighbors out there helping raise your children, where it was okay for them to chastise your child during that time. But now in the Black parent, you have children having children where they don't know how to be parents to the kids. So now what we're looking at is an unregulated versus a regulated home. So if that kid comes from a unregulated home, they're going to be dysregulated themselves, meaning that if the mom and dad, if they're not level out and not successful, but doing things that are positive, guess what? This is what this child see. This is their norm. This is what they're going to do. And it's not even about Black parents as a whole. It's just parenting in general, because if it's dysregulated, the child is going to be messed up. That's just like what Jermaine just said. 8 hours a day, and then you throw them back into that cesspool of a home where it's not regulated. That child is going to be messed up. That child is going to need therapy. It's going to need help, going to need coaching, going to need mentoring, all of that to stay on that positive road. And so, again, that's my take on it. But you can't have a regulated child and the home is not regulated.
So
I just want to add to that is the biggest problem that we're missing out of all of this, guys, is the humanistic factor. We're dealing with humans. Like when we talk about the responsibility of parents, first of all, parenting is subjective as a whole. You know, the way that you may seem as a standard of how you're dealing with parenting, that's totally different based on household to household. And also we feel just because we supply a need that people are obligated to want that need. What if you're supplying a need that people don't want? Like case in point, the example, you're saying we're doing a book bag drive. What if they don't need book bags? What if they need food in the house? And so what if somebody else had a food drive and they didn't come to the book bag drive because the food drive was more important? I think what is happening is we're putting policies in place, but we're not taking in the human component. And there are needs that we need. I like the comment that Jermaine made about not making police stay in the same area, because I disagree with that. Because what if I move up, but I still want to give back to the community that I don't no longer live in? That means you're telling me I can't give back because I don't live there. But I think what we need to do is stop saying we're not hiring good police, but maybe come up with behavioral assessments, not for them to see if they are a good fit, but to see what type of environment works best for them. Because there are a lot of good people that there's this thing called maldistribution, where you have a lot of great people, but they're in another side of the town, and then you have a lot of great people in one area, but no job for them. What we need to do is find the people who have certain skill sets and use them. Most anger, most frustration, most violence happens because of a lack of control and a lack of expression. So why are nobody talking about things that we can put in place to help people better communicate and better express themselves? We are going about it a different way. We don't need more policies. That's policing right there. We don't need that. But what we need to do, if you want to bring people together, think about the people. And I think we're forgetting about the people through all of this. Just like every last one of us have needs. If those basic needs are not met, you're not going to be comfortable in any situation. That's for the one who enforces the law and the one who have to live by the law. We need to bring, if we want to talk about bringing back something, bring back being a human. Can we bring back humanity? And I think if we bring back humanity, we'll start looking at things from a different lens. And I want to make sure that we don't get tunnel vision on representation. Representation matters when we used to do research before planting a business or a school in an area. What if we're talking about we want representation to matter, but we don't realize they live in a multicultural society? I'm from Augusta, Georgia. That is a military town. I went to a high school where it was rare just to be Black or just to be white. Everybody was mixed with something. So when you talk about representation, you can't just put a whole bunch of Black people in there and say that's going to help me. We need things that represent our community. So we're missing a lot of things because we're forgetting what it means to be a human. Just like you need oxygen, the same thing for everybody else. We need to put oxygen back into some of these policies that we have in place, because a lot of things aren't broken. They just need to be tweaked a little bit and looked at from a different lens. And I don't think we're doing that part.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And just to tack on to what Flo was saying was, it parenting, you see babies having babies, and this is where the conversations we've had is you just can't change everything all at once. You can't just assume what people need. And that's where the conversations we've had. And I love what Jermaine mentioned, because Ed said the same thing, was we need to get in there to the schools and be mentors to middle schoolers, and then teach them how to be mentors, so that when they're in high school, they're giving back. And then if they go to college, they're giving back to the high school, and that cycle. And, it's, whatever race you are, there's just broken society, broken families. And that's one of the things where, I look at my wife's family. She chose, she was, just babies having babies after another, and they were living in poverty. And it takes that one parent to say that my child is not going to grow up in poverty like I grew up and like my mom grew up. And to do that, though, you have to have somebody in there showing you there's hope.
Yeah.
And so we all have to make a commitment. As we, I love what Jay said, was we've made it out. We need to go back into that community, and we need to help others get out. And better yet, make that community not one you want to get out of. So I agree with everything you said. And I think, one thing that, because I'm very passionate, I say, okay, I have this, I want to make a difference. You can get very worn down because the numbers are barely going to budge, but we can't give up. We have to just keep at it. And even if you help one person, just think of who they might also help.
Lakeisha, can you come on the mic, and I'm sure you have something to say.
I had so much to say, but I feel like now I'm going to echo Jay, Garnett, and Jeff. But for the sake of the conversation, I'm going to echo. When we started talking about families, I have a lot of background with families. And we talk about backpack drives, and we talk about all of these things that organizations want to do for the families. But we're not meeting them where they are. We're not asking them what they need, what they want. I think Jay mentioned, you're sending me to a backpack drive and my electricity is about to be turned off. I need to be thinking about how do I keep my electricity on, or whatever other issues are going on within my home. So meeting them where they are, asking what the needs are, and then finding ways in which to meet those needs. I believe, Jay, Jeff, you also mentioned about mentoring children. We need to mentor parents. I didn't receive a mentor until I was older in life and did not understand the value of a mentor. And so establishing mentors from the parents, like we're children having children. So therefore the grandmother, the mother and the child are very close in age and never had that opportunity of mentorship, support, that mutual partnership that says that better things can happen for you, your family, and so on and so forth. So it's so much I wanted to say on here, but I was just really listening a long time. And I know Ed was like, get in there. But I was like, I'm going to echo. But you know what? For the sake of the conversation, it's worth echoing. And also opening the dialogue around that mentorship. Our parents need mentoring. They need mentorships. They need partners that opens up doors for them and show them something new.
So the question that I have for you is, how do you get, you talked about you didn't have a mentor until you got older in life. And I can say the same thing. And mine was a business mentor. How do you have the conversation with these parents to say, look, this is what a mentor is. This is why you need a mentor. Because I know that you're out there doing that work.
Yes, absolutely. We create space for mentorship. Oftentimes it's through the children. So I was a part of an organization where we were providing scholarships. And one of the very small mandates was that they would have to join our mentoring program. At that time, we have the ear of the parents. And so we invited the parents to then join the mentor program. They were super excited for the invitation and had identified never having a mentor. Very nervous about it, but not just there. Now we connect them to other organizations, to board opportunities, community partnerships. We're strengthening them and their skills on every level. But the invitation has to happen. We have to say you're not too old, you're not too whatever the last word is, whatever we want to put on it. But we're saying we're opening these doors for you because we need your voice and we need to know what you need and what the folks around you need.
And let me chime in on that part. I agree with what Lakeisha just said about the parenting. They need mentors. They really do, because I remember maybe a decade or so ago where I was a mentor to a fifth grader. To this day, I still keep in touch with them. And it was a single father raising two kids. And he did not know that his daughter had a mentor. So that was the first thing that he had a problem with. And so I was like, sir, before I even did this program, the school was supposed to have sent this information out to you, because this is not something that I just do on my own. I have to have permission and consent to do this. And so, long story short, I met the father. I said, you know what? I'm at your daughter's school right now. I can come to your home so you can know who I am face to face personally, to see who it is that's dealing with your son and your daughter, being a mentor to them. And so when I met them, like Jay said, meet them where they are. This was in the month of December, coming up to Christmas. When I met him, he was like, Miss Florida, I seriously thank God for placing you in my kid's life, because the mom just left them with me and there's so much going on. And I'm glad that you are a positive role model in their lives. And then he was like, they need winter clothes. I don't know how I'm going to be able to get this for them and this. I went into my pocket and gave him XYZ. And it was enough for them to maintain for that month. This grown man broke down and crying. At first, he started off hostile with me because I was mentoring his kids. But after he saw that I had a genuine concern for his daughter and his son, and then not just them, but for him too, so he can have a peace of mind instead of being stressed out about what's going on in their lives, he was like, you can be a part of my children's life for as long as you want to. I'm putting you on their school records, not just to be a mentor, but you can, if they need to be disciplined, you can discipline him. So as far as meeting them where they're at, as far as being a mentor, it makes a big difference in their life when you truly are passionate about what you're doing. And so because I was passionate about it and genuine about it, he saw the authenticness of me and being with his kids, not only with his kids, but supporting him. To this day, this was back in Mississippi. I lived in Georgia. We still kept in contact. Yeah. I'm here. We still keep in contact because he valued that relationship.
I want to add one more thing. I love what you said. I would challenge everyone. If you are a mentor to a child, automatically adopt the family. My mentor's family, they don't know that I automatically adopt them, but I keep them, as you said, involved in the conversation. I'm not meeting with your child without you knowing about me. So therefore, they're being mentored without knowing, and then gradually that relationship does happen. But just make that a part of your mentor journey, is to automatically adopt that family, to pay it forward in a larger way.
I like the whole concept of mentorship, but I like it better with just relationship, because we need to really just establish relationships as a whole, because that's what's missing. When I have a relationship with you, I'm able to confide in you differently. But, and I'm saying it a little bit differently, like, because I love the idea of mentorship, but when I put somebody in a mentorship hat, I don't look at them as a friend sometimes, or I don't look at them as something else. But if I just say I have a relationship with you and it's kind of like a fluid relationship, I feel like I can go to you about anything. You know what I mean? And I think that we're forgetting what it is to be human. And I think that there are a lot of assumptive stances that we have that are based on things that are not necessarily true. I think every encounter, we need to say, I have a foundation that is established in something, but it's not a one size fit all. Meaning, just because you are a single mother who had children early, that doesn't mean your house is unruly. That doesn't necessarily mean you don't know what's going on with your children. Now, that may be the case for 6 or 7 other families, but that may not be the case for every last one. And I think if we just bring back the human factor, I keep saying this, and really just talking to a person, we can see what those needs are and really come up with a smorgasbord of offerings and services. I mean, if we think about it, and that's really what you're doing, it's an evangelism tool of services. You connect people, so whatever need there is, we provide that need. And here is a great example of it from a professional standpoint, but imagine if we did it from a communal, humanistic standpoint, and really not try to, can we not be the savior? Everybody trying to be the savior. Can we all just work together and save a whole community? It's like, even with racism, everybody's trying to tackle every arm of racism. We can't do that. Let's just come together, find your area of expertise, and partner and build true relationships, and say, not only, like how Keisha said, we're going to adopt the family. Now I can call Ed and say, Ed, they need help with finances. Now I can help them clean up and make it look nice in the house, but can you talk to them about the money part? You know, and we go to this house together and show them they're our team. That's one of the things we do with Love is a Parable all the time, is showing people that they have a village behind them that supports them. If it takes a village to raise a child, what do you think what happens to that village when that child grows up? It becomes a city.
Yeah, Jay.
It takes a city to take care of that family.
One of the things, Jay, that Ed and I and many others in the financial planning industry love about financial planning is the fact that we are becoming mentors of families. We're not talking about finances. We're hearing all of their issues that are related to what their family is going through or what their family has gone through in the past, and trying to work out positive solutions for those. And it's not just financial solutions. Some of them are as simple as, making changes in their spending, but also talking to their kids about, finances, which sometimes parents are uncomfortable in doing that because they don't know enough. So, and obviously if somebody's uncomfortable, they're not going to do something. And I think that's one of the biggest roadblocks. There's too many people who are uncomfortable about talking to their kids about what is right. And because of that, things aren't getting, educated. The kids aren't being educated that way.
Mhm.
So Zan, you posted a question in the chat. Can you ask that over the mic, please?
Yeah, so I guess I'm coming from a little different perspective. I'm a football guy and actually coached high school football for a while. And so one of the things I think it came up earlier talking about, I guess what's being taught in education system and being cultivated back at home. And then Jay brought up the point about being respectful of, the home culture and making those pieces work together. And I know in the past with me, sometimes there's been issues where a player had opportunities to, play in college and other things like that. And I don't know, for example, we had one kid who He was offered a scholarship to go to a great program, good program, and more importantly, the head coach, we knew he's taken a number of players from us and was just a good guy. Does a good job developing them. And shortly after he received that scholarship, then he also received another one from another coach who just got that head coaching job. And that coach had a reputation of being a sketchy guy, just in the coaching industry, in the coaching business. But when he came in, he's promising the typical stuff like you see in the movies, oh, we're going to do all this for you, this and that, and all the shininess and, the bright lights that attract you. And I remember I was trying to talk with the kid about, hey, let's weigh your options. Let's, think through these things. Because even though the bright lights might look good right now, but you're going to go with there's a guy over here that's just has a track record of doing a good job in teaching guys how to live their lives, good ways after college. And in the middle of this conversation, the parents or the mom ended up reaching out to me, asking me to no longer communicate with their son because they wanted to go the other option with the lights and the flash and everything else. So I don't know. It's just, I'm aware of, cultural differences and accents and, the kind of the way we do things, the way we were raised isn't necessarily wrong, but just are there any tips of doing a better job communicating ways of making positive change, but still being respectful of kind of what their background is, if that makes sense at all?
Definitely. I like to touch on that one because I deal with athletes all the time. I'm a football guy, track guy as well. I think to start with that is let's redefine and let's define what education is. Okay. Education is any tool that you learn that allows you to create, produce, and protect your visions and dreams. Right. So the whole reason behind interscholastic sports originally was to teach youth the intangibles to be successful in life. How to work as a team, how to be a lead, how to come from behind, how to work in off season, how to plant and cultivate and then harvest when it's time to harvest. So all these different things are processes, right? I don't take what you did or what that young man did as a failure. This is just part of his educational process. We all learned that the glitz and the glamour are not what it looks to be at some point in our life. We just learn it in different ways and different variables. So that communication with that parent, with that child, I don't take that as a cultural difference. I take it as that's a point that they need to be educated from. And the process, the living experience that he's going to go through is going to teach him something that you could never teach him, because nothing is ours until we understand it, even ourselves, right? And he has to go through that process of learning and understanding it. That's one of the reasons why Jesus spoke in parables. I'm not going to give it to you because you'll take it and still won't have it. I'm going to give you a piece of it. You're going to decode it. You're going to process it. And now that you're going to know that you're going to know. So I don't think there's anything different that needed to be done there. You ran your race. Hey, young man, this is your opportunity. This is what this is. And you planted a seed. So at some point in time, whether it goes good, bad, or indifferent, he'll be able to come back and say, Coach Thomas told me about that. And I think that's the space of learning.
So I want to be very respectful of everyone's time. It's about 5:23 right now. We Are Connected is, all about bringing humanity together. And before I give the speakers a couple minutes to end on, I'd like everyone to just introduce yourself for 30 seconds. Introduce yourself, who you are and what you do, and how we can support you as a community as a whole. Because we got people here on Zoom, we got people on Facebook looking at us as well. So I'm gonna start from how I see people before I get to the speakers. 30 seconds, real quick, elevator pitch. I see Florida first, go.
Really?
Really?
Okay. Hi, I'm Florida Duvall Dudley, the founder and executive director of Shining Light in Darkness, a nonprofit that focuses on the underserved victims and survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And those underserved victims are women of color, men, people with disabilities, the LGBTQIA+ communities, as well as veterans. And then I also have a coaching business that focuses on my niche coaching is trauma because of me dealing with people that have dealt with trauma. So outside of trauma, I also do the life coach of happiness, confidence, and all of that. But I'd rather get to the root of the issue so you can truly experience the true happiness, the confidence, the self-esteem, and all of that goal setting.
Perfect. Keisha.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lakeisha Coppage. I am founder and principal of Coppage Consulting. It's a cultural awareness and diversity, equity, and inclusion company that focuses on strength-based and informative approach presentation. So I teach around anything from emotional intelligence to cultural humility and dexterity. What I need from you all is continue these conversations. Of course, continue doing this work, and any way that we can connect and support each other, I'm sure my information will be available. Thank you so much for the time. I actually was just about to say I have to jump off. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Keisha. Dan.
Yeah, name is Zan Thomas. I'm with Arnie Consultants. We do group benefits. So for if your employers, we offer identity theft protection to protect those financial assets. And then we also do legal services. So the idea is if you need any legal assistance, you can get it for less than $20 a month versus, $300 an hour.
Perfect. Mr. Rick Drew.
Yes, Rick Drew. I'm with Sedna Wealth Management. I'm a financial planner, essentially helping individuals and families manage and invest their financial assets. But just wanted to say, I really enjoyed this conversation. I agree with everybody that had things to say, and I truly believe there's a lot of opportunity for individuals like ourselves on the call who have made it into some part of a career or way of life to go back and focus on underdeserved communities and tell them what you do. A story goes a long way. I've seen it close and personal where individuals, especially at a young age, have been affected just by somebody in their life. And I think we can all do a great job of giving back in that aspect.
Thank you, Rick. Mr. Tillman.
Yes, I'm Wayne Tillman. I'm the president of the Financial Planning Association of the Triangle here in coastal North Carolina. And we have about 280 members. Ed is our newest diversity and inclusion director on the board. So we're really happy to have him, and I like being involved in this kind of conversation. Ed and I met with Tyrone Ross this morning, who many of you may know of. He was gave us some great ideas on how to approach high school kids and also middle school kids, and even pay off their their debt that they have that would prevent them from graduating from high school. So really kind of interesting, the conversations we've been having so far from an inclusion and diversity perspective.
Thanks for joining us, Wayne. Mr. John Lyon.
Yes, my name is John Lyon. I'm the owner of Lyon Financial Services. I'm a financial planner, and I help people, business owners, successful people make good decisions with their money. And we do that by actually developing a plan, profiling who they are, what their goals and their concerns are. And we like to deliver a written plan and then help them implement whatever those goals are. And so that's who I am.
And I'm honored to have one of my former district managers on the line, Mr. John Conakey. Thanks for joining us. If you want to jump on and just introduce yourself and tell us what you do. You're on mute, sir.
Unmute. There we go. Hey, Ed. Hey, Rick. Good to see you guys. It's John Conakey, financial services for the past 40 years. One of the things that attracted me to this conversation was the word disparity. So I'd like to use my 30 seconds to pivot back to Jeff. And he said in our business, financial services, 80% of the people are white. 98% of the assets under management, which produce the income in our business,
you heard it,
are controlled by white men.
Mm-hmm.
Is this not coming through?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, cool. My frustration is, how do we handle this disparity? The frustration is that back at Chase Investment Services in the 1990s, we had the same discussion. The numbers were the same. So there are some of us out there who have been trying to spend our careers to make that make a difference. And when I hear Jeff's stats, it's very disturbing that it appears that I failed to a great extent in not making a big enough difference. If you want to talk about systemic racism, look at those numbers. It's here, it's real, it's throughout financial services. And I'm unbelievably happy to see John Lyon, who's running his own business. You know, I've known Rick and Ed for 20 years or so, and I know the contributions you two gentlemen have made, and very positive, but the numbers haven't moved off the dime in the past 30 years from the conversations that we were having in our very white management committee meetings on increasing Black, people of color, women roles, not just as tellers, but as financial advisors, as divisional salespeople, as senior managers. And I'm not sure what the answer is. All I know is that this is something, if we're going to change the disparity of income in this country and opportunity, if financial services is one of the highest earning opportunities, we need to get more diversity. We need to get rid of this disparity, and we got to do it now.
Thank you, John. And just on a personal, I thank you for your support of me during my career and all that time and the guidance and things that you afforded me. So I appreciate you. Ms. Griffin.
Hi, I'm just basically being a participant. My name is Taniqua Griffin. I'm with the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. I work as an education compliance survey specialist. My job is to guard the integrity of the GI Bill for veterans, and I audit schools and training locations in their environment. Have a bunch of side hustles. I'm a Mary Kay consultant. I'm a paparazzi jewelry consultant. I also have a travel business, and I love serving the community. Service is my gift, and I serve the community with my local church and things in that area. So I'm here to help. It's more about what I can do for you guys than what you can do for me. So I'm just here to help and make awareness of these disparities, and hopefully we can connect and move forward.
Thank you. Ms. Olds.
Hey, my name is Carla Johnson Olds, and I am originally from Raleigh, North Carolina, but currently I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm a wife, minister, mother, entrepreneur, and I founded an organization called Pearls. Originally, this organization was founded for little girls ages 11 to 17, and we focus on cultural enrichment, spiritual enhancement, and career awareness. But as the ladies mentioned earlier, when I started mentoring the young ladies, the mothers also expressed interest in being exposed to those areas also. And I also am the owner of GEMS, Gracious Event Management Services.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Swiss Army knife.
Hi. My name is Rada Mills, and I am a lot of things, Swiss Army knife. So I'm on board of directors for Shining Light in Darkness. So please go follow Shining Light in Darkness. I work with We Are Connected. My business is Burton Brewington, and we specialize in public relations and helping you tell your story to the world. We also do event management and planning for large scale events, launch parties, festivals. I also am launching podcasts next month. Would love to have you guys be a guest on that. So we're securing guests right now. And then I also have another company where we connect brands with influencers, bloggers, and creatives, and we create an entire tailor around your product or service getting out to more people. And again, form of marketing. You can connect with me or get connected with me on LinkedIn. It's Rada Mills, and would love to get connected. But really, it's less about that and more about me being a servant. That is the most important thing right now. And being a servant in the community means sometimes we have to step into roles that are uncomfortable. We have to step into roles that require us to put an extra time and effort into people, even when we're tired. And so if any of you would like to get connected and collaborate, come up with ways that we can partner, make a better imprint in our communities together, please get connected with me, because it's not always about an invoice, it's about an impact. Done.
Love it, love it. Mr. Carter, are you there? Okay. You might be unavailable. Allison, you knew I was gonna pick on you.
Oh yeah, I was ready for it. I'm Allison McNally. I work for SEM Wealth under Jeff, and my job title is Community Outreach Coordinator. So a lot of my job recently has been researching these disparities and gaps in diversity. Specifically, I've looked at education so far, and I've started recently researching the financial sector. Specifically today, I was doing a lot of research on how wealth falls into the hands of Blacks and whites, and sort of what that difference looks like, those figures that Jeff was using earlier, like 98%. That's kind of my wheelhouse. And yeah, that's what I'm up to.
All right, thank you. So Mr. Garnett, some closing words.
Well, hey, Allison, it's great to finally meet you. J. Dwayne Garnett, I never even said anything that I do. I just got on here because it is like my big brother / mentor / dad at times. It depends on what he
Ain't that old. Stop.
It depends on how you act though, Bishop. So I actually have 19 years of experience in higher education, but I have also about 6 years working in behavioral and mental health. I used to work with adolescents with psychosocial and drug addiction disorders as well. And I have a couple of years of experience working in IT. I'm a graphic designer by trade and a motivational speaker. You learn how to do it all just to survive. And never saying no, so I believe in ever learning. I mean, no pun intended. But my wife and I started an organization that is called Love is a Parable, where the whole focus is to see a world living in unity through love. Yes, we talk about love, but I guarantee you it's nothing you've ever heard before. We have a unique approach that is called reflective thinking. So I use all of that andragogy experience and behavioral health experience to create a reflective thinking approach that allows people to combat restrictive ideologies, assumptive thinking, and limiting beliefs that hinder them from reaching what some like to call purpose or fulfillment, so that they can not only have it for themselves, but have meaningful interconnections. So we believe you heal one, you help everybody. My one thing that I definitely would like for people to do is take the lenses off of protecting self and start really looking at what opportunities out there. A lot of times we defend things only from our stance, and we only see things from our intention, but a lot of times people are hurting even though we don't mean to hurt, and we can contribute to that hurt. So I challenge people to just look at the humanity. Just like you didn't mean to do something, that still doesn't take away the fact that something still took place. I also want to challenge us to use words to really make sure that we're not using words to entrap people, but we're using words to empower people. Just like there's a difference between accountability and responsibility. Accountability takes on ownership. Responsibility deals with duties. So it is my duty as a person to respect your humanity, but it's not my accountability to be accountable for your humanity. I can only respect that. That's my duty. That humanity belongs to you, and I deserve to see that respect in you. So I challenge us to love one another for real, and really take a lot of the blinders off, a lot of the things that are separating us. It doesn't matter what we're up here talking about. If you don't see the value of a human, you're not going to see the value of the words that come out their mouths. So I thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to go on this. I actually have been doing this now nonstop for 3.5 years, where I come into places to have these tough conversations. Organizations and governmental establishments are calling on us to have those tough conversations, because a lot of us are realizing the traditional way is no longer working. It's just not working anymore. And so we now have to take those scales off and uncover how can we truly go back to the true essence of being a human, the true essence of humanity. So I challenge you to kind of take off some of those scales and not look at the things that separate us, but look at the things that connect us and see how much empowerment takes place. And I'm on something with you, Ed. What am I on with We Are Connected? And what am I on with Shining Light Out of Darkness? I'm something.
You just connected. Let's just leave it like that.
Whatever you tell me to do, I do it. And that's the same thing I just told Jeff. Whatever you tell me to do, not Jeff, I'm there.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Jermaine.
All right, thank you,
my brother. Mr. Hybeck, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I have a lot of them, but first of all, definitely hat tip to Allison. She, I use a lot of stats from there. I shared in the chat the diversity page that Allison and Courtney, our marketing manager, have put together. It's one thing Ed challenged us to do is we don't just need platitudes anymore. We need to take action. And one of the things we did, we're blessed to have Allison on our team. That's just a small part of our commitment to our community. Part of Allison's work is the outreach. So if I know a lot of organizations got thrown out there. So if you want to be added to our resources page, definitely reach out to Allison. We have 2 more research papers coming that Allison has written. This is me being the bottleneck and needing to proofread them. But so far, so good. The other thing I just want to close with, and I shared this with Ed before we started, is I've always been a person who studied history. Granted, what we got in school is obviously not what the real history was. Like 15 years ago, I read this book. It's called Generations, The History of America's Future by William Strauss and Neil Howe. And I took it in, I studied demographics, I studied everything. And I've talked about this thing called the social cycle for 15 years now. Every presentation has come up. One thing, big shout out to Allison, Courtney, Cody's on our team, with Dustin, is millennials have been bashed like constantly. And one of the things I learned from studying the social cycle is the different archetypes that we see in generations. Every generation is about 18 to 22 years. They each play a different role in our cycle and our history. Millennials, as bad of a rap they got, there are high performing millennials that have been taught to work together for the common good. Allison and Courtney met in college. They were the 2 stuck in a group project and who wanted to get a good grade. So they had to figure out a way to pull up the people who didn't want to work and get them to help. And so embracing those high performing millennials and getting them to work, they are going to be very passionate to solve this problem. And I was going through and looking for a quote in this book. Now, this book was written in 1991. Okay. And I was looking for something else. And I turned to this page. And at the bottom of the page, it says, "Enter the crisis of 2020. So these researchers who have studied the different cycles, they understand that we get to different phases of the cycle. And they basically predicted, studying our history going back to before our founding fathers left England to come here, that we've had these different cycles. And essentially what we were going to see is this crisis. And one of the things that I think to me is exciting, because we are living history now. And they said, again, written in 1991, what will precipitate the crisis of 2020? It really could be almost anything. The common theme will be, it will feel like our country is changing for the worse, when in fact, it'll be changing for the better. We will see the national mood just be so impassioned to tear down all the institutions that created great disparities in our country and rebuild them. So we can be part of the solution, or we can be part of the problem. The people who want to cling to the way things used to be, they're part of the problem that we need to figure out how to educate them and get them on board, because we're to this point in history where we can literally change the direction of our country. And to put it in perspective, the past 80 or 90 year cycles, the period we're in now, if you go backwards, the last time was the Great Depression and World War II. Prior to that was the Civil War. Prior to that was the Revolutionary War. And prior to that was back in King Henry, I believe, back in the 1680s. So each time our country has gone through this terrible period, but then we came out a little bit better, a little bit better. So let's be part of the solution. Ed, I'm so thankful every day that we met, because You called me out and said, let's do something, and we're here to do it. So everybody on this call, everybody listening on Facebook, we're here as a resource. We don't have all the answers, but we want to be part of the solution.
Thank you, Jeff. And when he says that, he means that. I started with the introduction with him. I've never met a man with the type of moral fortitude that he has. Jeff, if you don't mind me just sharing a little bit, I poured my heart out on social media via a video the end of May, and Jeff took the video, put it in a blog that he wrote, and one of his biggest clients called him out and said, why are you bringing yourself into this politics? And Jeff stood his ground. He had the potential to lose one of his biggest clients, but he said, I'm going to stand my ground for what is right. I don't know a lot of people that will put a huge account like that on the line by doing what's right. So Jeff, I applaud you. It's an honor and privilege to call you more than friend, but a brother of mine. So I appreciate you. Going to close it out with Mr. Jermaine Gaspar. Come on, man.
Hey, I won't say much. I know we're already over time. I'm grateful to be a part of what we're doing here. I'm grateful to be part of the conversation. There is a lot more to come. Again, the Violence Interrupter program that I'm initiating is going to be a national program. I've already started it in another state, and we will be doing it here in Dallas. Just look forward to anyone that wants to be part of the program, and just looking for really just the donation of your talents. The We the Willing will be the title of what we're creating. We the Willing is a call to action that my community is not designated by gender, race, creed, sexual orientation. My community is created of people that are willing to be responsible, willing to donate their abilities and means and gifting and be superheroes by utilizing their gifts for humanity. So as I push it to Ed and we push it out, I'll be looking forward to communicating with all of you, and y'all have a good day.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank everyone. Well, let me best back up for those who don't know me. My name is Ed Dudley. I'm the founder of We Are Connected. And at the end of the day, We Are Connected is all about connecting humanity by any means necessary. So any way I can connect people, I like to say that I connect people with the pros. And the pros are people, resources, and opportunities. And we're excited to have everybody on the line to just hold this conversation. And I challenge everyone to not stop having these conversations. Sometimes they're uncomfortable, sometimes they're difficult, but let's continue to have this conversation. Like Jeff said, I see a better America on the horizon. So I thank everyone for their time. If at any time I could be a resource or assist or serve anyone, don't hesitate to reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, it doesn't matter. I'm just here to serve you guys. I appreciate everyone. Have a great night. Have a great weekend, and everyone be blessed. Take care, everybody.